I help clients solve their most pressing people problems. I help them think differently about how they practice leadership. Leaders think that they have to have all the answers. What if it was okay to not have all the answers and to look to the people around you and to your team? It's not possible today for someone to know every single thing about the business. So when we leverage that common knowledge and we leverage the abilities of the people around us, we all improve our performance. And I offer that when you actually focus on your people first and you put them first, that everything else falls into place. You see them in the market because they are the market leaders. They are the ones who are winning the talent war. They are the ones who are winning on all these different KPIs and OKRs that you have to show that your business is outperforming the rest of the competition. The people that aren't adopting this way of thinking and aren't adopting these practices, they're stuck in the past.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou, and boy, do we have another exciting, emerging thought leader here for you. Today's guest is the author of the book, Be Human, Lead Human. I'm speaking, of course, of none other than the one and the only legendary Dr. Jennifer Nash. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki.
Great to have you here. So, Jennifer, tell us your backstory. How'd you get to be the great Jennifer Nash?
Well, I grew up in Michigan, and I spent the first part of my career working in the automotive industry, and then I transitioned over to professional services. And then for my third act, I decided to become an entrepreneur. And so here I am in my thought leadership phase, writing books and sharing that information with the world.
That's fantastic. So tell me, Jennifer, tell me about your area of thought leadership. What exactly is it that you do to solve problems for clients?
So I help clients solve their most pressing people problems. And to do that, I help them think differently about how they practice leadership. So for example, we think right now that leaders think that they have to have all the answers. Well, what if they didn't have to have all the answers? What if it was okay to not have all the answers and to look to the people around you and to your team to help you figure out, some of the answers to these complex problems that we have? It's not possible today for someone to know every single thing about every little thing that the business is operating in and doing. That's just not possible. So when we leverage that common knowledge and we leverage the abilities of the people around us, we all improve our performance.
That makes sense. So why is this important to you? What's the dent you're looking to make in the universe?
The dent I've been looking to make in the universe is to help people have a better experience at work. We see from our younger generation in the workplace today that they want meaning in their work. They want purpose in their work. They want their work to make a difference, and they want to matter. And the way that our organizations are set up with leadership, they don't tend to focus on those things. They focus on the numbers. They focus on the profits. They focus on the top line and the bottom line. And I offer that when you actually focus on your people first and you put them first, that everything else falls into place.
That just seems almost axiomatic. It seems like, but of course, duh, right? Take care of your people, they'll take care of your business. So why do you think so many people don't get it?
I think there's a couple of reasons why people don't get it. I think first and foremost, the status quo is a very hard thing to disrupt. And so that, second, I think people don't like change very much. So this requires that people think differently, and in turn, they act differently. And that's very hard for a lot of people. And I think the third reason is that, systems are designed to have a, consistent type of status quo happening, right? And so when you have an outlier that is introduced into that system, typically the system will eject the outlier. And so until you get enough people thinking about it this way and practicing it this way, it is still a disruption to what is a normal practice.
That's a very interesting thought. It reminds me, years ago, I saw Marianne Williamson do a talk in Toronto where I live. And she said that when a new idea is introduced into a society or an ecosystem, and I'd argue, a corporate organization is a bit of a society on a smaller scale, you first meet a lot of resistance, but over time there'll be people there that'll start to go, yeah, this is a good idea, but not very many. And it takes about 2% of the people in a society to buy into an idea for it to start to have traction, for people to go, okay, yeah, this has merit. And it takes a long time in certain cases to get to 2% of a society buying into the idea. But then she said the tipping point is when 11% of a society buys into an idea. That's when all of a sudden it transforms pretty rapidly. And she brought up a couple examples. One of them was civil rights in America, right? So she said from the end of the Civil War, 1865, right, which was freed, which was fought, I would argue to free the slaves, even though people said, no, it's about the Union. Well, preserving the Union was about one side wanted to have slaves, the other side didn't. So it was to free the slaves or not to have slaves. That's the bottom line. It took 100 years for there to be enough people to buy into the idea that everybody really ought to be equal and you ought not to discriminate against somebody based on their skin color, right? To like 2% bought in. It took 100 years to get to 11%. But then 1960s come along, and within 2-3 years, the Civil Rights Acts get passed, the Voting Rights Act get passed, and it seems like society had dramatically transformed almost rapidly. Do you think something similar is at play in corporations?
I think that's a great question. So I think that each organization is distinct in how it chooses to operate because each organization's culture is different.
Yeah.
So we may see a couple organizations here and there who think, yeah, we believe in this. This is the way forward. This is what we want to do. And you see them in the market because they are the market leaders. They are the ones who are winning the talent war. They are the ones who are winning on all these different KPIs and OKRs that you have to show that your business is outperforming the rest of the competition. The people that aren't adopting this way of thinking and aren't adopting these practices, they're the ones that are stuck in the talent war. They're not winning the talent. They have high attrition. They have low engagement, and they have not figured out how to move their organization forward. They're stuck in the past, and particularly they're stuck prior to COVID because these leaders consistently say, oh, I want to just go back to how it was prior to COVID. I want to just have things be normal, in quote marks again. And unfortunately, there is no going back to normal. And normal is a code word for we just want to have the power and control again, and we want to continue telling people what to do and have them do it. COVID was a Pandora's box. It opened that so that employees are like, wow, we have autonomy now. We have some voice. We're working at home, but we're able to now decide when we start and when we stop and how we structure our day. And as long as we get our work done, there's nobody hanging over our shoulder telling us that we should do it differently. There's no micromanaging happening. But yet companies today are wanting to go back to that because there was an element of power in that they are missing. And there are a lot of leaders who aren't comfortable with not having that power.
So what about those organizations that say people staying at home means that they dog it. They don't work as hard.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people, like I know a lot of CEOs. I got a lot of buddies who are CEOs and they own companies. And they basically, every single one of them says, I want my employees back in the office. I don't want them working from home. And they're enforcing that. I mean, you saw Elon Musk when he bought Twitter, right? Basically, all the folks who wanted to work from home got exited, and he's running Twitter with 20% of the workforce. So what about situations like that?
Yeah, I think there's a time and place to be in the office. I think that there are things that are more beneficial when you're in person, right? You can't replicate an in-person conversation. You
No.
can't do it over Zoom. You can't do it over a phone call. There are things that just happen in person that can't be replicated over technology. So that I agree with. But is it draconian to have everyone in the office from 9 to 5 every single day just because you want to make sure that you're, benefiting on your the sunk cost that you've made for that building and you don't want it to sit empty? Well, maybe there's a different way. Maybe it can be a hybrid approach. Maybe it can be an option where you allow employees to say, look, what works best for you? You know, here's what we're saying as a company. We want you in the office 2 or 3 days a week. Which of those days do you want to choose? Right? So still try to give the employee a little bit of autonomy around that. And that'll go a long way as opposed to just the draconian, like, our friend Elon did with, oh, if you don't want to work remote, if you don't want to work in the office, then there's no place for you here. I think that's at the opposite end of the extreme.
Well, I read his biography that Walter Isaacson wrote, and I also
I
read
did too.
Jobs one, and they're both amazing men with a storied history of creating incredible breakthroughs for the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'd want to work for either one of them. Would I want to be collaborating with them, like if I was their coach or something like that, or yeah, 100%. But to be directly under their control, oh no, hell no. They seem like they would want to. It seems like them being in charge of human beings in some respects can bring out the worst in them, and maybe even the worst in someone like me who doesn't like to be pushed around. So I totally can appreciate that. It's just not even Elon. I have friends of mine who are very forward thinking in their approach to business, and they want to see their people succeed. But this whole idea of people working from home, they're just completely adamantly opposed to it. And they're really pushing for their people to come back. I don't think they've been as drastic as Elon and said, you're fired if you don't come back. But they've made it very clear what their preference is, with carrots and sticks, to be honest. Not as far as firing, but as far as you come into the office, your life is and your prospects are here. You don't, well, they're here.
Yeah.
That's a fact. And I looked at myself like, if I were working for a corporation, I'd probably be in business development or sales. Business development or sales. Do I need to be in the office every day? Actually, probably not. Better off that I'm meeting with clients, that I'm in their offices if I was in that kind of a role. So I hear what you're saying. It's powerful. So based on this, who is your kind of ideal organizational client? What type of company is a good fit for Jennifer?
Mm-hmm. So companies that are a good fit for me are companies that are willing to question the status quo, and companies that are willing to think a little bit differently about the practice of leadership today and what that looks like. We see that there is an evolving role of a leader, and it's moving from that command and control space to a facilitator and a coach. And so organizations that are willing to reconceptualize this idea of a leader as somebody who is more on the facilitator side and the coaching side rather than the dictatorial side and the commanding and controlling side, those are organizations where I see there's a culture here and a mindset here that is more on the growth side rather than the fixed side. And those are organizations that I work well with to help them grow and evolve.
So do you find that there's a way to have that model still hold people accountable for results and sales growth and success? Can that be as effective as the old command and control way, or what's the story there?
I actually think it can be more effective.
Really?
Because when you give people, yeah, absolutely. Because when you give people some skin in the game and you give people some agency over their choices and how they choose to perform and what they have to do, they will go above and beyond. It's when you demonstrate that you don't trust them and you take away their choices and you take away their voice that people aren't inspired or motivated to perform. They're gonna clock in at 9, they're gonna clock out at 5 and go home. And they don't care what happens because you've shown that you don't care about them.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. That makes sense. People want to feel that they have some control and some agency, as you put it. That's a really nice way to put it. And I like a previous phrase that you mentioned, and that phrase was winning the war on talent. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a really good. If I were to be packaging you as a thought leader, I'd have you be talking about winning the war on talent. I'd just say Dr. Jennifer Nash's podcast, Winning the War on Talent, talks about how you can win the war on talent and bring in those people, because to me, that's very powerful. And that captures the essence of what's in it for companies to work with you or to talk to you, to read your book and all that good stuff. I think that's going to speak to what's in it for me. Why should I speak to you rather than, yeah, that's nice. Okay, sure. Be human, lead human. That sounds great. But what you're talking about is I can get the right people. Okay, now I'm ready to listen. So that's really good.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Jennifer, based on all this, like how do you attract these people that have these forward thinking views on winning the war on talent?
Mm-hmm. So often I find that either they've found out about my book somehow and they've read the book and they are coming to me to ask about what are different ways that we can work together. Sometimes it's that they have found my Human Leader Index online, which is on my website. And so they take that and they get an assessment for themselves of where do they fall, on this continuum from being a command and control leader essentially to a coach and a facilitator, and the leader of the future. And so they take that assessment, they look at where they are, and then there's recommendations in there. And then they end up calling me to say, okay, I want to implement these recommendations as part of my growth plan. How do I do that?
Say more about this Human Leader Index, because I'm a big fan of tools like your Human Leader Index. I have several of them myself that I employ in the work that I do with folks. So get into that a little bit more deeply and dig into it, please.
Yeah, so the Human Leader Index, the version that's online there's no cost to it. It's complimentary. And that is where the leader goes in or the individual goes in and takes their assessment and they self-assess on 7 different dimensions. And they get a report that shows them where do they fall on that spectrum. Are they, at the very beginning of their human leader journey? So in other words, they're using more of these command and control behaviors and thinking, or are they more on the opposite end where they're more in that, evolved leader space where they're using a coaching approach to leadership, or they're using a facilitative approach to leadership. And so it offers reflection opportunities at each moment throughout the assessment's results. And then it gives them the opportunity to think about how do they want to integrate that into their leadership development plan going forward. The paid version of the HLI is run as a 360. So the leader will take the assessment themselves and then they will nominate, 10 to 12 people around them to take that on their behalf. And then they get a report that compares the 2 results to show them how are they being perceived in the world. Because we know from research that typically, we tend to perceive ourselves a little differently than others perceive us. And so this 360 is an opportunity for them to test that, see where there are gaps, and then integrate that into a leadership development plan. And that version is actually paid.
I got to say, that sounds both exciting and scary at the same time. Like, I don't have 12 people in my company, but I run a men's organization, right? And if those dudes were to all take that, I'd be a little bit nervous about what everybody would say, but also be excited because it's an opportunity for growth. I think this is great. Yes. So, Jennifer, if someone wants to take the free version, the freemium kind of model that you're using, where do they go get that?
Yeah, so they can go right to my website. So actually there's 2 places, Nikki. It's in the book itself. In a paper and pencil version, that is just, very analog. You just fill it out and tally all the scores yourself. But if you want to go online and take the upscaled electronic version, then the system tallies everything for you and gives you a beautiful 20 or 25 page report on your results. And that's on my website at drjennifernash.com/HLI.
drjennifernash.com/HLI. Okay, that's pretty cool. We're going to make sure that we put that in the show notes so people can access that. So Jennifer, we end off every episode by asking you, the guest expert, for your top 3 expert action steps. These are your 3 best pieces of bullet point advice for my listener. What say you?
So if I had to give your listeners 3 pieces of advice, I would say the first piece of advice is don't be afraid to be yourself in the workplace. And if that means that is you looking a little different than other people, or thinking a little bit differently than other people, or speaking a little bit differently than other people, embrace that. That's part of what makes you unique, and it's part of what is your important value proposition to the world. The second thing that I would offer to people is that remember that when you trust people first, you get trust in return, and then you move forward together faster. I think that's the second piece I would offer. And the third piece I would offer is that nearly everyone I talk to when they come to me for a coaching engagement, they say in some form or fashion, I want to matter. I want to know that my work is making a difference in the world. And so I would invite your listeners to think about, how do you help people feel that they matter? And what do you do to show them that they matter?
That's a fantastic question. Oh my God, that hit me right there. Boom. That was brilliant. Dr. Jennifer Nash, thought leader extraordinaire, the person who shows you how to win the war on talent, the person who shows you how not to lose the war on talent, and the author of the amazing new book, Be Human, Lead Human. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Nikki. And you know what I forgot to mention? I just launched my masterclass for the book. So that is available. If people are interested, they can go to my website and take a look for that. It's drjennifernash.com/humans masterclass.
We'll make sure we put that in the show notes too. Thank you so much for letting us know about that. Listener.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Listener, Dr. Jennifer Nash is the real deal. She's a thought leader extraordinaire. She's written a fantastic book. She thinks deeply about people issues, talent issues. And I got to tell you, whether you work by yourself or you're leading a team or part of a team, thinking about your fellow man and woman is important to helping you not just be a better human being, but be a more successful professional in business. So make sure you go to her website, grab a copy of her book, and you check out her Human Leader Index, the HLI. I think that sounds fantastic. I think I'm going to go and I'm going to take that HLI test. It sounds fantastic. And if you got something out of the episode, leave us a rating, leave us a review. That helps us with the algorithm. And if you have a friend who you know would benefit from what you heard here, share the episode with them. Don't be a stranger. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.